get a seat as soon as possible. I want to get things started on this lovely morning here at the Sixth Conference, the fourth annual Sixth Conference. Let's give a round of applause for Six, because I'm so happy to be here. So happy to see you all here. And reminded of my time when the very first Sixth Conference, and to see at the rate that this organization has grown, and our growth is due only to you and your participation, your commitment to the movement, your commitment to moving a progressive agenda, your commitment to progressive ideas, and your commitment to a progressive vision. So give yourselves a round of applause. We all know that after last year's election, a lot of people were left wondering which way to go. A lot of us didn't know which way was up. A lot of us felt that everything had been lost. And a lot of people wrote off the progressive movement. A lot of people thought that there's no way that we could ever come back. But if you look around this country and you see some of these special state legislative elections, the people are on our side. And the people are on our side because, again, the ideas are on our side and the vision is on our side. The energy is with us. And if we keep this moving, if we keep this going forward, we will see a progressive resurgence like never before. As we go into the fourth annual Sixth Conference, again, it's hard to believe it's the fourth annual Sixth Conference. As a former legislator, as someone who's participated in every conference in some iteration, and now as a member of the Sixth staff, and it's so exciting to see the growth. We're going from 14 to over 30 staff members, and I think that's also worth a round of applause because people work so hard to put this conference together. And I will forget names if I try to introduce everyone. So, with that said, are we ready for an exciting 3 days? I tell you, we want to wait for the hotel bar caucus to arrive. And it seems that most, if not all, are here. We can enjoy the evening festivities, but we do have a wonderful program set up for us because, you know, we are going to take this to the next level. When they say, you know, our state is under attack from ALEC, our state is under attack from the Koch brothers, from Robert Mercer, and they say, well, what's your answer? And I'm here to tell you that the answer is 6. I'm here to tell you that the answer is you. And before I bring up our esteemed executive director, I just want to give a few housekeeping items. I want to remind you all that today is an open press day. Want to remind everyone to please keep your credentials on you. This is a higher security than normal event. And we want to encourage you to use social media. Make sure you use our hashtags. We have a Snapchat filter for those who are on Snapchat. Please tweet freely, post to Facebook. We want to be sure to engage people. We don't want to keep the progressive movement hidden in darkness. We want people to know exactly what we're doing because we're open about our objectives. We're open about our agenda, and we also want to make sure that you have a good time. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to a staff member. And if I could get you to rise to your feet for the leader of our organization, someone I look up to, someone who's been very helpful for me, someone who reached out to me, someone who you should all know if you don't already know. Someone who is making sure that we take back power in the states. My good friend, my boss, Nicholas Rathod. Give him a round of applause, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Mandela. Well, good morning. It's great to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces. I just wanted to take a moment to welcome each of you to our fourth annual conference. Each year we say it's a historic gathering. Each year you change that history. With nearly 600 state legislators and staff in the House, this will be the largest gathering of progressive legislators in the history of this country. Give yourself a round of applause. So I was thinking back to last year and the last time we were together. It was on the heels of one of the most devastating elections in the history of the country. I recall still being in a haze and a funk, shell-shocked by the idea that Donald Trump was going to be the 45th president of the United States. I remember desperately looking forward to last year's conference, to be in the same room with all of you. But this year is very different. It is in some ways even more critical moment, and this will be a very different gathering. Donald Trump and the Republican Congress has proved to be, if this was at all possible, maybe even worse than many of us thought. We are in a crisis and an incredibly delicate moment that I believe will define who and what America is and will be for generations to come. If you're a student of history, I'm sure you understand that this country has been in these important inflection moments throughout our existence. Think of the Civil War. Think of the Vietnam era and the Civil Rights Movement. In each of these moments of struggle for what our country is and what our shared values are, we have in fact progressed, moving our country forward bit by bit to do as our founders described, to form a more perfect union. I obviously didn't live during those times. I just know what I've read and learned, but this time feels a little different. I feel anxious about it because there are challenges we face that are different. Right now, it seems like we can't agree on basic facts and have a president who is driving this misinformation by either claiming fake news or just outright lying. We are part of a reality television culture where instant gratification and self-centered behavior is rewarded. Again, look at our president. And we are in this moment where the balance is tilted so heavily towards the right that each of you in this room are having to fight an onslaught of attacks and policies that are coming now from both Washington, D.C., as well as the conservatives in your states. You are defining what it means to resist. You are, in fact, ground zero for the resistance. In many ways, the states have been where we have been able to get some wins, fight back, and hold the line, despite historic levels of control by conservative legislatures, governorships, attorneys general, and of course, control of the Congress and the presidency. But we can't and have not been able to fight everything. Our country is in trouble. Take, for example, what just happened exactly a week ago in Las Vegas. We will hear in a few minutes from the Nevada delegation, and we'll hold a moment of silence for the victims of that shooting. Nearly 60 people died. 530 were injured. But what is going to change? The same thing that always happens is happening. There is shock, there is outrage, and we are told it's not a time to politicize guns. And then slowly things go back to the new normal. This time, even more so than other times, it feels so futile to hope for common sense gun reforms. And it's amazing to me how we've just allowed this sort of thing to become now part of our daily lives. A few weeks ago, my children started school. I have twin boys. One is in first grade, and my daughter is in fourth grade. I went to their back-to-school night and spoke with one of my boys' teachers. She was telling me about how the kids have to go through what they call a safety drill. Let me describe to you what a safety drill is. This is where children, our children, in their classrooms, go with their teacher to the back of the room, or a corner, or a bathroom, depending on the classroom, and have to get down on their knees and cover their faces. The teacher locks the door, shuts off the lights, until they hear a knock, or an all clear from an officer at that school. The teacher told me that these safety drills occur now just as frequently as fire drills. We have normalized murder to protect guns. Our children now have to bear the burden of our inability to do anything about gun violence in this country. My boys are 6. Let me underscore this point. It has gotten so bad that 6-year-olds are having to accommodate the gun lobby because our leaders don't have the courage to stand up to them. And as I listened to my children's teacher describe this, I couldn't help but think that we have failed them. I see what is happening in Puerto Rico, in Texas, and Florida over the past few weeks, and the failure of both to respond both immediately and long-term to the effects of climate change. And I look at all of our kids and worry what type of world we're going to leave them. Right now in this country, because of Trump's decision to end the Deferred Action for Our Childhood Arrivals Program, or DACA, there are more than 800,000 immigrant lives hanging in the balance. I recently read a story of a young Pakistani woman named Saba, who moved to this country with her family when she was just 11 years old. But she has since fallen out of status. Because of this program, she is now a PhD candidate, a researcher, and a professor at Texas Tech University. If Congress fails to act on DACA and it becomes repealed, she will have to leave this country. Think about that. This young woman who is working to get her PhD, she's a teacher and a researcher. She's going to be deported back to a country she barely knows. There are thousands of these stories. And that is just a drop in the bucket of examples of why this moment is so critical and why the stakes are so high and why it is no longer okay to just resist and hold the line. This moment requires all of us to move beyond resistance. Too many lives are on the line, especially the youngest and most vulnerable amongst us. The future of our country is literally hanging in the balance. And what we do over the next several years, especially with 2018 and 2020 looming, I believe will seal our fate and the fate of our nation. So what does moving beyond resistance mean? First, the progressive movement needs to clear space for new and more diverse leadership. There are currently too many people who think the same way and frankly look the same way at the helm of our ship. I respect and admire many of them, but at the same time, this group was at the wheel while state legislatures, governorships, and attorneys general have fallen into record control by conservatives, which I would argue also led to the election of Donald Trump. We need leaders who understand how power works in this country and how much of it is derived in the states. We need leaders who think differently about how to engage in the world and who are not willing to double down on the same old ways. We have tried those ways, and they clearly do not work. It's time to support and pave the way for new leadership that we see coming up in the states, many of which are sitting in this room today. It's the states where this new class of leaders resides and works, and where we should be looking to help move this country forward. Next, as progressive leaders, we must be able to connect politics and policymaking with non-electoral social movements. For far too long, elected officials have been wary of social movements, and movement leaders wary of elected officials. There's a long history for the reasons why. That could take all day to dissect. But the truth is, in fact, both need one another. We have a number of important movements occurring almost simultaneously on the left. Think the movement for Black Lives, movements around climate change, the Fight for 15, the Women's March, and more. But unless we begin to connect these important movements to actual policymaking and electoral politics and politicians who are not afraid to harness the power of these movements in their communities, we are merely engaging in a kind of political theater that we may call resistance, but achieves limited outcomes and fails to fully harness and realize our full power. We also need to flip how we think of politics and policymaking within the progressive movement. It's exciting that the left is finally waking up and realizing that these things called states exist. It's amazing to me the number of people who patted me on the head or rolled their eyes when I would talk about the states. Now are the same ones who are now running into the states and trying to shift their focus to do more state work. Donors are starting to give to state work, and we have a rush of groups who are now running into the states. But my fear is that this is fleeting. I am not sure people on the left realize just how much power emanates from the states. It is where policymaking actually occurs in this country, and where lives are directly impacted. It is where federal policies are implemented. It's where congressional districts are drawn, and power is established. It's where you can define for people what policymaking is and how they should think of their government. And it's the legislatures, where you can find a young Barack Obama and our country's next great leaders. We have always been taught to vote down the ballot. It's time to flip that on its head and start thinking of voting up the ballot. Conservatives have understood this for decades and created institutions just like SIX beginning in the 1970s, which has allowed them the sort of command and control they now have in American politics. We need the same level of investment and focus in a long-term strategy, not just cycle by cycle as we have done forever. We need to have the ability to think and act in terms of power, both building ours and undercutting theirs. And the donor class and others across the movement need to show the patience and the level of investment in institutions like SIX, because the return on that investment, it's much more transformational than the billions we have spent on consultants and television ads cycle by cycle. Finally, we need to be focused on our values as progressives. We need to think less in terms of being transactional or reactive in our policymaking to one that is transformational. We need to root ourselves in the values of freedom and opportunity. We are much more than being against Trump or a list of demands. Our movement is rooted in the values that have attracted so many to this country and allowed us in the past to be the envy of the world. The values of opportunity, that no matter who you are, you can realize the American dream. The value of freedom, that we believe everyone has a right to express who they are in their faith, in their speech, who they love, as well as the freedom to live your life, to have basic things like health care and earn a living wage. My parents came to this country with basically nothing. They settled in central Nebraska, where I was born and raised. The town I call my hometown had a population of about 800 people. My father was a preacher, and my mother stayed home to raise my sister, brother, and I. My father's income was meager. In fact, I began working in the corn and bean fields in Nebraska before I was even a teenager. We qualified for things like the free school lunch program and other assistance. I was called the N-word almost on a daily basis, and at times even beaten up because of my culture and the color of my skin. It would have been easy for my brother, sister, and I to have given up. When you grow up this way, what people expect you to do are pretty low, especially when they think you are less than them. But we didn't give up. Because in the face of all of that, we believe we can make ourselves into something different. Because we were given a little bit of help, it allowed us to believe that this country cared about us. Because we were told by my parents that we could be whatever we wanted, we believed it because it was reinforced by the values of this amazing country. And we did. My brother runs his own law firm here in DC. My sister is in the senior executive service and a section chief in one of our major intelligence agencies. And I have to tell you that I will never forget the day I walked through the gates of the White House for my first day working for President Obama. From abject poverty in India, to the cornfields of Nebraska, to the White House, working for the first African-American president. In no other country would that story be possible. My story is America's story. It is also the story of what it means to be a progressive in this country. Because without the opportunities my family and I were provided by progressive policies, my story and so many stories of people from all over this country would not be possible. It's these stories and these values that we should own and remind the country who is actually fighting for them. History is watching us. So let's use this moment and this conference to think differently, to root ourselves in the values we share as progressives, and to be bold and strong in fighting for them. This is how we can move beyond resistance and how we can reset the direction of this country that we all care so deeply about. Thank you.